Marcus Reed was not the kind of man who sat still. He never had been. Even as a child growing up in a small apartment in Memphis, Tennessee, he was always moving, fixing things, building things, thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone around him. His mother used to say he was born in a hurry and had never slowed down since. By the time he was 46 years old, that same restless energy had carried him all the way to the top of a $14 billion company. He was the founder and chief executive of Apex Meridian Technologies, one of the most respected supply chain software firms in the United States. He had been featured on the covers of business magazines. He had spoken at conferences in London, Tokyo, and Dubai. He had shaken hands with senators and signed contracts with companies that employed more people than some small countries. And yet, on a rainy Thursday evening in March, none of that mattered even slightly. The roads were wet. The streetlights on Peachtree Road were blurring in the rain. Marcus was driving himself home from the office, which was something he liked to do on the rare evenings he left before midnight. It gave him a few minutes of quiet, no calls, no emails, just the hum of the engine and his own thoughts. He was thinking about a meeting he had the next morning when a delivery truck ran a red light at nearly 50 miles per hour and hit his car so hard that the sound of the impact echoed for 2 city blocks. Emergency crews arrived within 4 minutes. Marcus was pulled from the wreckage unconscious, with serious injuries to his chest, his leg, and most critically, his brain. He was airlifted to Emory University Hospital's trauma center, where a team of surgeons worked through the night to save his life. He survived. But when he woke up 11 days later, something was very wrong. He opened his eyes slowly, like a man surfacing from deep water. The ceiling above him was white. The light was soft. A woman in a white coat was standing beside his bed, writing something on a clipboard. He watched her for a moment. Then he looked at his hands, the tubes running into his arm, the hospital bracelet on his wrist. He read the name on the bracelet. It meant nothing to him. He turned to the woman in the white coat and said, in a calm and quiet voice, "I don't know where I am. I don't know who I am." The neurological team confirmed what they had feared. The injury to his brain had caused severe retrograde amnesia. Marcus had lost not just random memories, he had lost himself. He could not remember his name. He could not remember his company. He could not remember his childhood, his mother, or the apartment in Memphis. He could speak, think, and reason perfectly well. But the story of his own life had been completely erased. He was 46 years old, alive, and an absolute stranger to himself. His sister Vivian flew in from Portland the next day. She had not spoken to Marcus in 3 years. They had drifted apart the way busy people drift apart, slowly, without a single dramatic moment, just a growing silence that eventually became the normal thing. She sat beside his bed and showed him photographs. She told him stories about their childhood. She described the way he used to take apart electronic devices as a boy just to see how they worked, and how he always managed to put them back together perfectly. Marcus listened to everything she said with polite, careful attention. When she finished, he looked at her gently and said, "I believe every word you're telling me. But I don't remember any of it. I'm sorry." Vivian went to the corridor and cried for a long time. It was on the second night in the neurology ward that Marcus met Amara Osei. Amara was 34 years old, a registered nurse on the night rotation. She was the daughter of Ghanaian immigrants, her father had been a civil engineer, her mother a schoolteacher. Amara had put herself through nursing school with student loans and part-time work, and she had been a nurse for 9 years. She was not the loudest person in the room. She was not the kind of nurse who made grand gestures or gave long speeches. What she was, and what every single person on that ward knew about her, was this: she paid attention. She remembered what patients said. She noticed when someone's breathing had changed, or when someone had not eaten, or when someone was lying awake in the dark pretending to be asleep because they were afraid. On the night she first walked into Marcus's room, she read his chart carefully before entering. Then she pulled a chair to the side of his bed, sat down, and was quiet for a moment. She did not launch into a checklist. She did not treat him like a problem to be managed. She simply said, "I know you don't know who you are right now. That's okay. My name is Amara. I'll be here every night." Marcus looked at her. Something in his chest, something he could not name, settled slightly. "Thank you," he said. Amara. The nights were the hardest part. During the day there were doctors, tests, therapy sessions, and Vivian. There was always someone coming or going, always something to respond to. But the nights were long and dark and quiet, and the confusion that Marcus felt during those hours was a different kind, deeper, heavier, almost like grief, though he could not say what exactly he was grieving. He would wake at 2 or 3 in the morning, heart racing, completely unsure for a moment even where his body was in space. The room would feel unfamiliar all over again, as if he were waking up for the very first time each night. And then Amara would come. She never rushed. She would check his vitals, adjust his blanket, and then sit down. She would speak in a low, steady voice, telling him the date, the room number, the name of the hospital. She was grounding him, anchoring him to the present moment when the past was completely unavailable to him. Sometimes she read to him from a small worn book she always carried in her bag, a collection of letters written by a poet named Rilke, full of thoughtful and gentle words about living honestly and without fear. She did not read it because she expected him to remember it later. She read it because she believed that the right words, spoken in the right tone, could reach a person even when nothing else could. Marcus began to recognize her voice before he could consistently remember her face. He told a day nurse once, during a lucid moment, "There is a woman who comes at night. She makes the dark feel smaller." She never tried to fix him. She just made sure he never felt alone while he was broken. 3 weeks into his hospital stay, something shifted. Marcus was looking at a photograph in a frame that Vivian had placed on his bedside table. It was a simple picture, a golden retriever sitting in the grass, tail blurring from wagging. He had no idea what the dog's name had been, or when the picture had been taken. But something in his chest tightened when he looked at it. His eyes filled with water. "That was mine," he said quietly to himself. "I don't know what I mean. But I know that was mine." The medical team explained to Vivian that this was how memory returned in cases like his. Not in a single rush, not in a dream where everything suddenly came back. It came in fragments. A smell would unlock a feeling. A sound would open a door. The brain was relearning how to reach its own stored history, and it did so on its own unpredictable schedule. The rehabilitation team worked with Marcus every day, and he was a diligent and serious student of his own recovery. But it was the nights, the hours with Amara, that felt, to him, like something different from therapy. She did not ask him questions about his past. She asked him questions about the present. What did he notice today? What made him feel unsettled? What had he wanted to say in a meeting that he had decided not to say? She treated him not as a patient with a condition, but as a person with a mind worth engaging. One night he surprised her by asking about the hospital's billing system. She explained what she knew of it, half laughing, wondering where the question had come from. He listened carefully, asked 3 follow-up questions, and then picked up a napkin from his dinner tray and began drawing a flowchart, a cleaner, more efficient version of the process she had described. She stared at it. "You do this naturally," she said. "You think in systems." He looked at the napkin as if he were seeing himself from the outside. "I suppose I do," he said, quietly. "I wonder where that came from." By week 6, more of his memory had returned. It came unevenly, like light through clouds. Some stretches of his past were suddenly bright and clear, while others remained completely dark. He remembered his company before he remembered his own last name. He remembered the feeling of making a deal before he remembered the deal itself. He remembered the face of his ex-wife, Claire, before he remembered their wedding. He called Claire from his hospital room one afternoon. She answered on the second ring. The conversation was short. She told him she was glad he was alive. She said she hoped he came through this as a changed man, and her voice was kind when she said it, not bitter. He thanked her and hung up, and sat for a long time holding the phone. That night he told Amara, "I think I chose the company every single time. Every time there was a choice between being somewhere that mattered and being somewhere that looked important, I chose the one that looked important." Amara did not argue with him. She did not tell him he was being too hard on himself. She just nodded slowly and said, "That sounds like something worth knowing." It was a small sentence. But it landed in him like something permanent. He had forgotten everything, and in that emptiness, he found the first honest thought he'd had in years. Week 10 brought a different kind of difficulty. A major business newspaper published a story about Marcus, quoting unnamed board members who suggested he was cognitively impaired and unlikely to return to executive function. His attorney brought him a printed copy of the article. Marcus read it without expression. He folded it neatly and placed it on his bedside table. He did not say anything about it until late that night. When Amara came in for her rounds, she could tell immediately that something was weighing on him. She sat down. "I'm thinking," he said, carefully, "about not going back. Not to the company. To any of it, that version of my life. I'm not sure it belongs to me anymore. I'm not sure I want it." She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I don't think you have to decide tonight what your life will be. I think tonight, you just have to decide to stay in it." She paused. "Are you deciding to stay in it?" He looked at her for a long time. The room was quiet. Outside, somewhere down the corridor, a monitor beeped steadily. "Yes," he said. "Partly because of you." She stood up. She adjusted his four-line with the calm efficiency that was her professional way of changing the subject when the moment had become full enough. "Then that's enough," she said, "for tonight." What Marcus did not know during those 14 weeks, what he only learned later, was the quiet sacrifice that Amara had been making the entire time. She had rearranged her schedule repeatedly to stay on his rotation. She had taken extra shifts. She had done this not because anyone asked her to, and not because she expected anything from it. She had done it because she believed, in a simple and unshakable way, that this particular person needed consistency, that for a man who had lost the entire story of his life, having the same calm presence show up every night was itself a form of medicine. She had her own life outside the hospital. A younger brother she helped support. A small apartment she was slowly making into a home. A ceramics class she attended on Sunday mornings, her hands in cool clay, her mind quiet. A mother in Ghana who called every Sunday evening and to whom Amara never mentioned the patient who drew process flowcharts on napkins and asked her at 3 in the morning whether she believed people could genuinely change. Her answer, when he asked, had been this: "I think most people can change. I think the ones who do are the ones who stop running from the question long enough to sit with it." He had sat with that answer for days. 3 days before his discharge to a rehabilitation facility, Marcus asked Amara to stay a few minutes past the end of her shift. She stayed. He handed her a sealed envelope. His hand was steady. He had been practicing steadiness for weeks now, in his walk, in his speech, in the way he approached every small task of recovery. "Don't open it here," he said. "Open it when I'm gone. It's not money. I want you to know that before you take it, because I know you'd hand money back." He looked at her with the kind of directness that had slowly returned to him over these months. "It's a letter. I wrote it 3 times. The first 2 versions weren't honest enough." She took the envelope. She looked at it for a moment. "What should I hope for your future?" she asked. He thought about it carefully, which was new. The men he had been before the accident, people who knew him would later say, never paused before answering anything. He always had the answer ready before the question was fully asked. But now he took his time. "I want to be useful to actual people," he said. "Not to a company. Not to shareholders. To people." He paused. "I want to remember what it felt like to not know who I was, because it turns out that not knowing was the first honest thing that had happened to me in a very long time." She gave him back nothing he had lost. She gave him something far better, the chance to choose who he would become. Amara opened the envelope the next morning, sitting in her car in the hospital parking garage with the engine off and the early light coming through the windshield. Inside was a letter, 4 handwritten pages in Marcus's now slightly uneven script, and a single printed page from a real estate listing. The letter thanked her, but not in the formal way that powerful people usually thank those who have helped them. It was not a letter from a CEO. It was a letter from a person. It said that she had never once treated him like a puzzle to be solved or a reputation to be saved. It said that she had been willing to sit with him in the dark without trying to rush him toward the light, and that this was the rarest thing one person could offer another. It said he had thought a great deal about what it meant that a stranger had believed in him when he had no proof to offer her, no achievements, no history, no identity, and that she had believed in him anyway, based on nothing more than the person he was in those quiet, unguarded hours. The real estate listing was for a small commercial space in Decatur, a former pottery studio with wide windows and exposed brick walls. Attached to it was a handwritten note that said, "For the ceramics class. If you'd like it to have a real home. No strings attached. You taught me that some things should be given without strings." Amara sat in her car for 11 minutes. Then she drove home. Marcus returned to Apex Meridian, but not as the same man who had left it. He spent 2 months in a residential rehabilitation program, then 3 more in outpatient therapy. When he came back to his company, he restructured his role, keeping his strategic responsibilities but distributing authority across a newly empowered leadership team. The interim CEO who had moved quickly to fill his seat resigned within 60 days of Marcus's return. 3 of the executives who had questioned his recovery quietly reversed their positions once they sat across a table from him. The company stabilized, and then, over the following year, it grew in a direction that surprised even its longest-serving employees, toward more transparency, more investment in its own people, and a new philanthropic foundation focused on brain injury recovery for patients who could not afford it. He reconnected with Vivian, imperfectly, slowly, with gaps and awkward silences and occasional backsliding into old habits. But he kept trying, which was something the old Marcus had never been willing to do. He called her every Sunday. Sometimes the calls lasted 5 minutes. Sometimes they lasted an hour. He was learning, at 46, what many people never learn at all, that relationships require showing up even when you do not feel like it, and that the showing up is exactly the point. He did not pursue his ex-wife again. But he called her once, 6 months after leaving the hospital, simply to say he was sorry, not for anything specific, but for the cumulative weight of years spent choosing his desk over the people who needed him. She said, "I know," in the tone of someone who had already made peace with it. They left it there, and it was clean. He still woke up at 5 in the morning. He still ran. But sometimes now, in the middle of a run, he would stop completely and look at the sky for a minute or two, just look, without a plan, without measuring anything. People who passed him on those mornings probably thought he was resting. He was doing something much harder than that. He was practicing the art of being present, which was the one thing he had needed all along and the one thing it had taken a catastrophe to teach him. Amara accepted the studio space. She renovated it over several weekends with help from her brother Daniel and 2 friends from her nursing cohort. She named it grounding, a word that meant something to her on 2 different levels, though she kept both meanings to herself. The workshop opened on a Sunday morning in October, and 12 people showed up. By December, the waiting list had grown. She taught ceramics there 2 evenings a week and on Sunday mornings, exactly as she always had, except now there was room for more people, and more light. She remained a night nurse at Emory. She received a formal commendation that year for outstanding patient care, which she accepted quietly at a small department ceremony. Afterward, a younger colleague asked her what her approach was, how she managed to connect with patients the way she did, especially the difficult ones, the ones who were lost or scared or angry. Amara thought about it for a moment. "I just decide, every single night, that whoever is in that room is worth being completely present for," she said. Not half present. Not professionally present. Actually present. That's it. That's really all it is. She and Marcus met twice in the year that followed his discharge, both times for coffee, briefly, in a quiet place. They did not become close friends in the way that the story might seem to demand. Life is not often that neat. But they were something that is perhaps even rarer than friendship, 2 people who had seen each other at their most essential, one without his identity, one without recognition or reward, and had found that what they saw was worth honoring. He had walked into that hospital as a man defined entirely by what he had built. He had walked out as a man still deciding what he believed, what he wanted, and who he intended to be. The accident had taken his past. But Amara, patient, steady, and entirely unimpressed by his former life, had helped him understand that a person is not only their history. A person is also every choice they make the moment they are given a second chance. And Marcus Reed, for the first time in a very long time, was choosing carefully.